So today actually we will look at the topics all related to code security. So the buffer overflow, then security of mobile code, and the next topic is malicious code, which means malware. All right, so we will look at all these three topics. So security of mobile code. So mobile code means the code that can be run in different platforms. We are not talking about mobile device security, right? So mobile device, of course, they can also run mobile code, but we are not really studying the mobile device security. We look at the mobile code security. That means the code that can be run in different platforms, including the mobile device. So of course, mobile device also have their own security problems. But we will not look at that part in this subject. So mobile code basically, for example, all the codes that can be executed in using like a browser. So most of them are like mobile code, like HTML, like JavaScript, like VB script, and so on. So we have like a client-side scripting language. These are all mobile code. On the other hand, we also have the server-side scripting language, like a PHP, CGI, and so on. So basically, this kind of code, we consider them as a mobile code, right? So usually, the browser, for the web browser, all the programs that can be executed in the browser, we consider them as a mobile code. So we will mainly look at the code that will be executed in the web applications or browsers, right? So we will look at basically the scripting language, and then also like HTML, HTTP, HTML, and so on. So we start with a very simple program, simple example. So the HTML. So HTTP basically is a protocol that allows us to visit different website, right? So however, so start when we first develop this HTTP or HTML for web browsing and so on, we actually didn't really consider security. So there are security mechanisms, but they are very weak. So for example, so in the HTTP 1.0, so for example, if you want to protect the content, so you can ask the user to give a username password, right? However, so the username password will be sent in this kind of format. So actually, you may think this is encoded. Actually, it's indeed encoded, but encoding is not a mechanism that can provide security, right? So if you study 368, so you should know the base 64 encoding used in email. So this actually is the same encoding used in the HTTP 1.0. That means if you use if you want to edit a web page, so you give a username password. So this part is not encrypted; it's just encoded. They're using base 64. And if you know how to do the decoding, you can convert this string back into the original form. That means you are essentially sending username password in plain text. So in this case, right? So anyone actually who can eavesdrop your communication can get your username password. Right? So this is a simple example to illustrate actually for many mobile code. At the beginning, we didn't really look at the security. We have some mechanisms, but these mechanisms are not really secure. And for HTTP or HTML, actually this is not the only problem. So there is another problem, which is related to the GET protocol. So when you try to send information to the server, so you can use GET protocol, POST protocol, right? So and also sometimes actually you can put instead of using the GET protocol, so you can also store some information in your cache by using, for example, hidden fields, right? So this is a method used by, for example, the shopping website. So when you select the items, you can cache all those items in the hidden field, right? So you may also cache some user credentials in the hidden field, right? So in this case, actually, So some people will do this because it's convenient. But however, so this kind of mechanism will bring problems. So similar as the GET protocol. So you can, for example, you can just give your username password and send the username password using the GET protocol. So all these kind of methods, basically you will have this user credential exposed to other people. Right? For example, in the hidden field, if someone else can access the machine, actually they may be able to get your username password. For the GET protocol, similar as the previous case. So if someone can eavesdrop your communication or access, for example, the log file of the server, then they can get, because the log file will contain all the requests, right? So they will be able to see all these information, so user credentials, right? So we can see. So at the beginning, when we try to develop like web applications and so on, we have some security in mind, but we didn't really treat security very seriously. So this actually is the same for many different applications. For many applications, when we first developed those applications, like Wi-Fi, like even like telecommunication and so on, so we may have some idea about security, but when we design the system, actually we always put security as a last step. So that's why, like in 368, you will study many standards. They are just you can treat them as a plugin for the normal original protocol, right? So for the IP protocol, we have IPsec. For TCP, we will have like TLS, SSL, right? For Telnet or remote shell, we have the secure shell and so on. So similar in the web domain. So at the beginning, we actually didn't really treat the security seriously. So later, then we add in a lot of mechanisms to enhance the security. So in this case, so for the HTTP, so we looked at several issues that can cause security problems. And then for the authentication part, then actually later we did some modifications to enhance the security. For the authentication, so the first improvement done was to use the hash function again. So we don't send the plain password, but we use hash function to protect the communication, to protect the password. Right, so in this case, we do not simply hash the password, but we use a so-called challenge response. Right, so the challenge response basically is to prevent the so-called replay attack. Because if you just send the hash of password, then someone who can eavesdrop the network and get this hash, later the person can simply send the same hash value, hash of password, to log into the system. So to prevent this kind of attack, so we don't send the hash, the password, we use the hash of password, but we also include some additional items to prevent a replay attack. So the mechanism we use is a so-called challenge response. So every time, similar as in the client puzzle or in the capture, so the server will send a challenge. So you need to use your credential, for example, the hash of password, to solve this challenge to generate a response. So this is to prevent a replay attack, for example. So how does the improved HTTP protocol address password authentication? So basically now in the improved version, actually we use MD5. So we use MD5 as a hash function. So it will, basically we will combine different components like username, authentication realm, that means the authentication domain, password, so we will hash them. And then we will also hash other content. For example, the web page, the resource requested by the user. And then this will be the hash value 2. Then we will do another hash. We will combine the hash value 1, hash value 2, and also the nonces. So if you still remember, nonce means number used only once. So that's basically the challenge sent by the server. So we hash all these content together. This becomes the response. Right, so if you look at the example given in this IFC, so this IFC is where we propose this hash function-based approach. We use challenge response. Right, so for example, if you want to visit this website, right, so you can have the like an authentication method, and then this is basically announced from the server, right? So this basically the server will send all this information, right? So these are the options you can use for authentication, and then the user will choose one of them, right? So the user will, for example, choose this option, and the user will have username password, of course, but we now don't send the username password in clear text. We also don't simply hash the username password. We combine the username password with other content, including the nonce and so on, right? So the nonce and also the page you want to visit, and then also like a sequence number. So you also have a sequence number, right? So you put all this information into the hash, and then you will get the response, right? So if you look at, yes?
Then will the password get converted into the hash?
Sorry?
Then will the username and the password get converted into the hash?
These are the input for the hash. So if you look at the next slide, so basically you first hash username, password. So yeah, username, and this is where you want to visit, and the password. You use MT5 to hash this string, you get one hash value. This is what you want to visit. You use MT5, you get another hash. Now you have the hash here, the hash, first hash, the second hash, and in the middle you also put some other content, like the nonce. This is the nonce sent by the server, and then the nonce generated by the client, right? So you put all this information in the middle, and then you hash this again. You get this. This is the final response. So basically, username password will be hashed. And then this part is not, we do not directly use this one, because if you directly send this one, someone later can replay this hash value. So we include other content, for example, where you want to visit, and then the nonce from the server. So this part is very important, because the server will every time send a new nonce. So you can see this is a very large number. You can treat this as a large random number. Every time the server will send a large random number that will never repeat. So in this case, you will generate a response, a new response every time. So the response is fresh every time. You cannot use the old response to answer to answer a new challenge. All right. So can you understand this part now? Yes. You understand this part now? Yeah. Okay. So, however, so if you look at this method, so actually many contents are sent in clear text. Many contents are sent in clear text. For example, the nonce, and then the realm, and the username may be known by the attacker. All right. So in this case, actually this protocol, although it addresses the problem of the HTTP 1.0. So, however, this one is still subject to the password guessing attack, because eventually you will still get a hash value which contains a password. So if all the other content are known by the attacker, then the attacker can do a brute force to find the password. You can try different password to generate the first hash. Suppose what you want to visit is public, is known, then attacker can generate the second one. And there's nonce, all the nonces are sent in clear text, so attacker can also obtain those information. Then you may do a brute force to find the password. So this kind of authentication always have this password, like offline password guessing attack. So the mechanism here is similar as the mechanism we use in Windows NT for remote login. So if you use you are logging in a domain, that means there is a domain controller who have your a hash of password. So if you log in, you use username password to log into the domain, then basically a hash of the password will be used in this challenge response. So in this case, actually you can still use offline password guessing attack to break the password. So if we use password for remote login, many of the protocols will be subject to the offline password guessing. Okay, so actually nowadays we have some new standard which can provide even better security. So in particular, so if we use public key cryptography, then we can replace the password using PDC. So this is basically the proposed for HTTP 2.0. So we use digital certificate and public key cryptography to do the authentication. So this is essentially the final version. So in RFC 7486, right? So in this case, now we use digital signature, right? So we use digital signature-based approach because nowadays actually certificate can be free. So there are many CAs, they issue free certificate. Actually, the certificate, you can apply certificate, free certificate for I think 9 months or 1 year. So if you can apply certificate, that means you can use public key cryptography. So you can use a digital signature. Maybe I don't go to the details here because if you haven't studied 361 or 368, probably this will need some time to explain how it works. So essentially, if we use this kind of public key-based technique, server does not need to store any secret, right? So, and then every time when you try to log in, you sign a digital signature. And the signature is much more secure than password. So from the signature, people actually cannot derive your secret key, cannot forge a new signature. So the strength will be better. And in particular, the server will not store any user credentials. So in this case, server will only need your certificate to verify your signature. So this can address the problems. For example, the leak of the server password or the offline dictionary attack and so on. Right, but this is just for your information. Okay, so that's basically about the authentication, right, and the user credential, right? So, for example, if you send your username password in clear text, or you send username password in using this hash-based method, then you can have a problem, right? So, in the previous slides, we are talking about a long-term user secret. So that means like your password or your signing key, these are so-called long-term secret. You will use this secret for long-term. And on the other hand, sometimes we also have some short-term secrets that allow you to log into a website without entering username password. So one such mechanism is called a cookie, right? So you can use the authentication cookie to log into the server without entering the password, username password again. And the cookie actually can be you can set an expiry time, the lifetime. So the lifetime will basically allow the cookie to be valid just for short lifetime. For example, the so-called session cookie will only be valid for 1 session. That means after you finish the session, the cookie will expire. However, so this is like some sort of short-term secret, and the cookie is different from password. So cookie is a short-term secret that allow you to directly log in. So that means you don't, if you visit different places, you don't need to enter username password every time. The cookie will allow the server to verify your identity. So this is a short-term secret. However, so this kind of secret can still be used by the attacker. For example, the attacker may hijack your session. For example, the attacker can steal your session cookie. So in this case, so the attacker will pretend to be you to communicate with the server. Yes?
So if the cookie expires, then we have to enter the username and password.
So if you use a cookie, the cookie expires. That means you need to log in again. You get a new cookie. So like the session cookie I mentioned, it's only valid every session. That means every login session you get 1 cookie. But if you exit the website, then the session cookie will expire. Right. So that's basically some method we use to improve the usability. Right, because we don't need to enter the password username every time. However, so later we will see the cookie actually can be a problem. For example, later we will see some example like so-called cross-site scripting. So attacker may steal your cookie, then the attacker can hijack your session. That means the attacker actually can use a cookie. The attacker does not know your password, but if the attacker can steal your cookie using some attack, then the attacker can hijack your session and then communicate with the server using the session cookie instead of your username password. Right, so then what can we do? So actually one way to do this, to prevent this kind of exposure of secret is again using cryptography. So if you can encrypt your username password in this case, then even if, say, the attacker can see the content, they cannot know what's the user credential inside. Right? So, however, so they need to make sure the encryption key is well protected. So this is what we can do if we want to really protect. For example, in the hidden field, we don't want other people to see the content or even like the items you want to buy. So then you can encrypt the content. But you need to make sure the key actually is well protected. Right? So that's the first part for the mobile code security. We look at the first part essentially is about authentication, right? You use how to let the server verify you are the user. So the early version of like HTTP protocol, actually they provide very weak. Essentially, the first version provides no protection. But later we use some method to improve protection. The second part is about like some malicious content that will be executed in the browser, right? So we will look at some like problems that can be exploited by attacker using like a scripting language, right? So if you use JavaScript, VB and so on, then if the web content contains this kind of active content, then you need to like pay attention because if you enable this kind of active content to be executed, then this kind of code can cause damage to your system. Right? Nowadays, if you like open a web page, if it contains active content, the web page will give you basically it will be blocked by default by the browser, and then the browser will give you a warning and ask you whether you want to enable the content or not. If you choose to enable it, then make sure you are visiting the correct website, because if you are visiting some fake website, the active content can be malicious. So we will look at some examples. Right, so if you enable the content, active content, similarly nowadays actually when you run the Microsoft Office, so if there is active content like macros inside, then the system will also automatically block it for you. And the system will ask you whether you want to enable the macro. Right, so if you enable the macro, then maybe the macro contains a virus, then it will cause damage. Right, so we will look at some similar scenario later when we look at malware. Right, so this is one simple JavaScript file. So in this file, we have if you have such a web page, you run it. Basically, there is an infinite loop inside. It will create this alert infinitely. It will basically continuously produce this alert. Right. So if you click OK or cancel, then you get a new one. So basically, what you need to do is to press Control Alt Delete and then kill the browser. So right. And in some browsers, actually, if you run you run this malicious web page, actually it will produce thousands of alerts simultaneously. So you can see a lot of alerts on the screen. So in this case, actually, it will cause some sort of denial service attack because it will consume a lot of resource on the machine. Right. So basically, this is not what JavaScript can only perform. Then you can also use JavaScript to do other like malicious activity. For example, it can redirect the web page to another like website. So for example, even if you close the web page, it will open several new pages like with different addresses. Right. So actually, this can be done quite easily. So if you you have a JavaScript like this, then basically you can add a function which will open some new page. So of course here you can change to other addresses. And then when you close this web page, that means then when you unload this web page, you close the web page, then this function will be run, and then it will open 2 new pages for you. Right? So it may open not 2, but maybe 10, 20 new pages when you close one page. So in this case, actually you can also put different addresses here. So to open different web pages when you close one of them. Okay, so this can also be done by using JavaScript. So that means if you you enable this active content, then it will have this kind of problem. Right, so and then you can also basically burn the CPU, or you can burn a memory, so like the stack, right? Because we know every time you call a function, we will create a new stack in the memory. So if you have a recursive function, actually you will create many stacks inside the memory, right? So if say you run this Fibonacci sequence, this is a recursive function. It will, because the function will call itself, right? So this is a recursive function. So in this case, it will burn the resource of the machine, right? So this is what happens when you run this program. Right, so we can also use the JavaScript to do the spoofing attack, because JavaScript can be used to, for example, produce new frames or new pages. And then the user, if the user is not aware of the attack, then the user may mistakenly type in the username password into the pop-up or the new frame created by the attacker. So in this case, the attacker may be able to steal your content, right? So steal your input. Okay, so because we can actually change a lot of items in the browser. For example, you can change the go-to field. You can display. You can change the link that will be displayed when you try to point your mouse to a particular link. Actually, you can change the content where this link is pointing to. So by doing this kind of activity, basically the attacker tries to fool the user to either, for example, go to a wrong website, go to a fake website, or mistakenly put some confidential information into the frames or boxes generated by JavaScript. Right, so we can also do this kind of attacks. Right, so JavaScript is the client-side scripting language. That means when you download the web page containing JavaScript, basically the JavaScript will be downloaded to your local machine, and then the browser will ask you whether you want to execute it or not. If you execute it, then the JavaScript will be executed on the local machine. That means in this case, the victim is the client, the web client. And on the other hand, we also have some server-side scripts. That means these are the scripting language that will be used by the servers. For example, the Apache server, right? So you can use the CGI, PHP, and so on. And for this kind of server-side scripting language, then the target will be the server. Because the server may contain, for example, the user may want to see the password file, the password like a table on the server side, right? So some attacker may try to maybe crash the server and so on. So in this case, if we run some server-side scripting language, then the server can also become the victim, like the target of the attacker. So PHP is basically one popular server-side scripting language used to generate like a dynamic web content. So essentially, if you have PHP in the web page, then actually it will, for example, do some query to the database and then find the results and generate a new web page and then send to the user. So the user can give a request, then the PHP will, based on user input, will run. And then will, for example, get the data from the application server or from database. Then the content will be used to generate a web page and send to the user. So essentially, the script will generate a web page, but eventually that can be seen can be watched by the user. Right. So in this case, actually, if we are not careful, for example, we do not check the input provided by the user carefully, then if the input is malicious, and then actually we can inject some malicious code into the server side, and the server may execute some malicious content. Right, so this is very simple PHP like a script. Essentially, it will just print the hello world, this sentence on the web page. Okay. So this is another one. So if you use a for loop here, then essentially the PHP, when you visit this page, the PHP will generate like a page like this. And then So basically the content here will be generated by PHP and sent to the user. So of course, user can also provide some input. Then the PHP can, based on user input, to contact the application server or the database to get information and then display the information to the user. Right? So this is convenient. However, so we need to be careful. If the user can provide some input, then it can be a malicious input that will cause damage. Right? So for example, suppose say you use like the get method, right? So you allow the user to give input. So suppose the user change this part to this one, right? Then if there is no checking on the user input, then the password file on the server side will be displayed, right? So when I studied my bachelor, I did my internship in HSBC for 1 year, right? So and at the time, actually, my job was to design also like a so-called platform for trading, right? And then we also used this kind of like method, the get method. And then when the testing team came, right? The first thing they try is to change the content. So essentially, they just basically the original page is say page 1 for merchant 1, right? And then they directly change the content to page 2 for merchant 2, and they see whether they can see the content or not. And actually, at that time, so when they first step they try this one, actually it worked. So they can, for example, merchant 1 actually can immediately see the content of merchant 2. So then later we change. Basically, we need to change the whole system. So we need to redo all the jobs. Right, so that's basically if the user can change the input. For example, the user originally display one page, but now if the user say I can change the content here, and then I change the content, and then I press enter. If I can see the content of this new page, then actually this is dangerous because that means the server does not check any user input. Right, so this is another example. For example, if the server actually change the path to another website, because PHP can include other scripts. For example, the script in a different website, you can include those scripts into your you can specify. For example, when you run the PHP, you can include other code from a different place, right? So as far as you can specify the path. So in this case, say if the attacker can change the path, so we allow the attacker to specify the path. The path now, if it's pointing to a malicious website. Then when you try to call the function, you are using the code in the malicious website. Basically, you include the code downloaded from malicious website. In this case, actually, you can also have a security problem. Right, so later, so actually, we'll see another example. So say if you use this kind of function, for example, this function or the execute function, to run some like a command or program, then this can also be dangerous because if depending on whether the input is provided by user or not. So if say you use this one to run a utility command command, but the input is given by the user, then the user may use some malicious input to see confidential information and so on. And if you execute some program also based on user input, this can also be a problem. So one example is shown here. Suppose you have a web page which allows user to send email using the web page. So you can specify what is sending address, what is receiver address. You put the body of the email inside frame, right? So in the frame you can put a message body, and you can put your sender address, receiver address. You press the button, and the email will be sent to the receiver. Because in email system, actually we don't require authentication for the sender. So actually you can send the email on behalf of anyone. All right. So in this case, suppose the attacker actually discovered that there is no checking for the user input. Then what the attacker can do is to change, for example, the receiver address to this one, right? To its own address. But now actually you add something extra here. Instead of put this, if you just have this kind of code, if you put this address, this is the receiver address, and put this one, that means you use this password as an attachment. This password file will be used as an attachment, and then send to the receiver, to the malicious attacker. So in this case, the attacker will obtain this password file, right? So that means if you do not do the sanitization or do not do the checking for the user input, then this kind of malicious content can let the attacker obtain the malicious, get the important information on the server side. So now basically the victim is the server, not the client, right? So that's another example where we can actually have a security problem. And then in PHP actually we have the so-called safe mode. So you can actually enable the safe mode. Then if you enable the safe mode, some of the problem can be solved, right? So for example, if you turn on the safe mode, then basically you can specify some you can configure some of the options. For example, if you can configure this option, that means that you can only allow the user to access files within this directory. You cannot allow user to read or open files in other directories, right? So you can also basically put all the executable in one directory. That means only the executable within this directory can be executed, right? So you can also basically specify what are the variables that can be modified by the user, what are the variables that cannot be modified by the user. For example, you can say the path cannot be modified by the user. So in this case, we can prevent some user to change the path to a malicious location or a malicious website and so on. So this you can set the safe mode to prevent some of the problems. Okay, so the last part of this this topic is about access as cross-site scripting. So this is one of the security issues. So major security issues nowadays. So the cross-site scripting basically is can be exploited by the attacker to basically to obtain, for example, user credentials or user cookies and so on. Right. So this is one of the major security problems listed in some security websites. So we can have a look at some of the examples here. Right, so we can watch a video which shows how this actually can work. Okay, seems the website is not working. Right. Okay. Anyway, the link actually illustrates one example of cross-site scripting. So this is basically one type of injection attack. So in the injection, in this case, the malicious user will try to inject some malicious code inside the website. For example, if there is a forum, so in the movie it's a car sale website. So in the car sale website, user can post a message or blogs, right? So they can post the cars they want to sell. And actually the website allows user to use the HTML tags. That means you can specify, for example, you can highlight the text, you can change the color of the text, and so on. So they allow the user to input the HTML tags in the post. Right, so in this case, actually the attacker can exploit this vulnerability. So the attacker can instead put some scripting, some script code inside the HTML tag. Okay. Okay, so if the user, actually the malicious user puts some a script inside the HTML tag, then the server basically will store the HTML. The server will store this content. Maybe you can post, say, I want to sell my BMW, and then you put a tag which actually includes some JavaScript or like other script code. Then if the server does not do any checking, then basically this code will be stored by the server in a database. And later, actually, if someone tries to visit that page, then the code will be downloaded to the client's machine. Then the client basically will run this JavaScript or like another script code. So in this case, for example, the script can simply steal the cookie, the session cookie. For example, user need to use a session cookie to user need to first log in and then use the session cookie to authenticate itself. But if the user say browse this page which contains some malicious code, then the malicious code will be executed and then the code will steal the user credential like the cookie and send to the attacker. Now the attacker can hijack this session. Basically, the attacker can use the cookie to log into the server and then basically modify, for example, the user information or obtain some like a user some confidential information like a credit card number and so on, or even change the user password and so on. So in this case, basically the attacker can use this kind of a cross-site scripting to compromise the account of another user, right? So this is how this attack works, right? So unfortunately, this actually it still worked when I played this just several weeks ago, right? So why this is significant? Because it's very easy to test whether a site actually is vulnerable to cross-site scripting or not. Because you can simply look at the post provided by other users, and you can even do some simple tests whether you can embed any tags or any special input into the content. So nowadays there are so many blogs, so many websites allow people to post comments. So if the website allows people to, if the website does not check the content carefully and allows the user to post any type of input, then actually the cross-site scripting can occur. Because this malicious code can be stored by the server, and later when someone tries to read the content, then the code will be executed on the victim's machine. So in this case, we have a software injection. So we inject the malicious code on the server, and when people read the content, they will be the malicious code will be executed on the victim's machine. Right. So there are some damage that can be caused by cross-site scripting. For example, they can modify your file, they can delete, transfer your file, secret file, or they can steal your cookie, session cookie, and so on. So all these kind of, they can also do the web redirection and so on. Okay, so this is one of the major threats. Nowadays, one of the major threats. Another one is cross-site request forgery. So it's the name is a bit similar. So cross-site request forgery. So that one actually is slightly different from this one. Basically, that one will, when you load some web page, actually the web page will send some request. For example, send to your bank to do some transaction, but actually this is not intended by the user. So that's why we call it cross-site request forgery. So it will forge a request by the user. So this kind of attack can actually cause damage. So user may have even direct monetary loss due to this kind of attack. Okay, so there are actually different types of cross-site scripting. So the one I mentioned is called the persistent cross-site scripting. So for this kind of attack, the malicious code will stay on the server side. That means why we call it persistent, because the malicious code, when the user enters the malicious code as part of the content in the block, then the code will be stored permanently in the server side. So that's why we call it persistent. Then anyone who want to read your blog, read your comment, actually will download the content, including the malicious code. Then the code will be executed. Right. So this is type 1. Right. So this is basically what I just mentioned. So someone can post a message with malicious content like JavaScript. And then when Bob tries to read that comment or blog in the website, then basically this malicious code will execute. Then actually the code can do a lot of damage. For example, steal your data, transfer a file, if delete file, and so on. And then basically for example, if this malicious code steals the cookie of Bob, then basically now the attacker can hijack Bob's session, because Bob can simply use a cookie to impersonate the victim. So in this case, the cookie will allow the server to let this attacker access information Bob originally could access. Okay, so the type 1, the so-called reflected or non-persistent XSS is another type. So in this kind of cross-site scripting, so the malicious code now is no longer stored on the server side. It's reflected back to the client, to the victim. So it's like some sort of reflection. So in this kind of attack, actually we can have one example from Wikipedia. So in this case, actually the attacker will send like a link to the victim, like using phishing email and so on. And then the victim will click the link, but inside the link, actually there also contains some malicious content, right? So now if you click the link, this content will be sent to the server, and when if the server reflects this content back to the client, then the client will be attacked. So in many services, in many in many websites, actually, what the user input will be reflected back to the user. For example, if you do some search, like you want to search something, so actually what you searched, so basically the content you search will be sent to the server, but later it will be reflected back to the client, right? So there are different types of services which actually will do this kind of reflection. That means when you access the server with some input, the input will be reflect back. So in this case, the attacker can embed some malicious content in the input, and then when the client sends this content to the server will reflect this back. So in this case, actually, the victim will still be attacked. However, now the malicious content is not stored on the server side. So that's why we call this reflective cross-site scripting. So it's just some sort of reflection attack. And then there is another type which is called the local access. So in this case, the attacker will exploit some vulnerability within the user's local machine. So now actually the server is no longer involved. For example, again, you can send a phishing email, and then inside phishing email, actually, if you click the link, so it will actually the link will point to some local content in the victim machine. So if the local content actually is vulnerable, then you can basically execute the local content with some input, and then you can again cause damage. In this case, the server is not involved at all. You just execute some other vulnerable content on the victim's local machine. So this is another scenario about this local access, or so-called DOM-based access. Yes. Right. So how to protect the cross-site scripting? So one way is to do the filtering, of course. For example, in the persistent XS, so the server can do filtering. If you give me some input, like you post some message, I can do the sanitization, right? I can check. Say if I can find the term JavaScript, or I can find the term script, then I will not accept the input. However, so the problem is this kind of screening or sanitization actually may not work, because there are a lot of encoding that can be used to bypass this kind of screening, right? So for example, the attacker may, instead of using JavaScript, the attacker can change his state by using a different encoding method. In this case, if you just search JavaScript, you cannot find it. But actually, when this is stored on the server, when someone downloads this page and browse this page, then the JavaScript will still be executed. All right, so this is one actually method that can be used by the attacker to bypass the filtering done by the server. Right, so this is basically the people use the encoding to cheat, to pass the filter. And then on the other hand, actually we can also use encoding to prevent this kind of attack. So the idea is you encode everything except the normal characters. For example, you only leave the normal A to Z, 0 to 9, and some other characters unencoded. But for everything else, you encode it. Then you basically put because if you only put the encoded data, then someone tries to read the data, then the encoded data will be decoded back to the original format. However, now it will be treated as a character instead of a command. So for example, in the previous one, so if you send something like this, all this content, all this content will be encoded using an encoding mechanism instead of sending all these characters, special characters in clear text. So that later when someone tries to read the content, then basically this encoded string will be decoded back to the string. But now this is treated as a string by the HTML engine. So it's no longer treated as a command. So this is basically how we can also do. We can use to prevent cross-site scripting. So there are some libraries available, like the Microsoft anti-access library. So they will perform the encoding for HTML, JavaScript, VB and so on. Right. So this is one way we can use to prevent cross-site scripting. Okay. So.